Our story begins with Chi's sister's death from cancer, which motivated him to find a cure. He dedicated himself to becoming a scientist. After 40 years of hard work, he became a well-known pharmacist. However, he worked too hard and eventually took a nap, which led to him being transported to a new world. When Chi opened his eyes, he found himself in a strange place and saw a girl named Lot standing in front of him. She explained that he had been struck by lightning a few weeks ago and had been in a coma. It dawned on him that he must have died in his sleep and ended up in an alternate world. He told Lot that he couldn't remember anything about himself, so she brought him a mirror. Looking into it, he saw he was now in the body of a boy named Pharma, who had a lightning-shaped mark on his arm. Lot told him that this mark signified the god of medicine. Pharma didn't understand what she meant and brushed her off. She went on to explain that his family had been royal pharmacists for generations, almost as important as the king. Then, she took him to a hall filled with portraits of his parents and told him his family was very skilled in magic, which excited Pharma. He asked if he could do magic too, shocking Lot. She reminded him that noble families had to be able to perform magic. Otherwise, people would see him as common. She told him he used to be good at water magic and encouraged him to try remembering how to use it. Pharma returned to his room and sat on the bed, pondering how to practice magic. He thought about the chemical structure of water, and suddenly, he felt something stir. Water formed in his hands, and in his excitement, he rushed to the window, accidentally spraying water all over the garden. After managing to stop the flow, he was exhausted. Lot, who had been in the garden, rushed upstairs, thrilled to see that he remembered how to use magic. As he thought more about molecular structures, he realized he could create complex compounds if he understood their chemistry. Lot then asked if he had forgotten all his medical knowledge, and took him to a massive library filled with books. She said he had read all of them and remembered everything perfectly. Picking up a book he didn't recognize, Pharma realized the contents were already in his mind. Some memories were still with him. At dinner, his family appeared worried about him, except for a serious-looking man who turned out to be his father. His dad was happy he was recovering, but immediately began firing medical questions at him to see if his memory was intact. Pharma assured his father that he was okay and answered correctly. His father seemed satisfied and suggested that Pharma should restart his magic training the next day, to which Pharma agreed. The next morning, he met his teacher, Ellen, who looked skeptical and claimed he didn't seem like the Pharma she knew. Aware of his memory loss, she introduced herself as his father's top student and his new tutor. She asked if he remembered any magic, to which he replied, no. Helen explained the basics of magic, including the elements of fire, water, air, and earth, and how they could be combined. She took him to a fountain and asked if he had brought his wand. Confused, Pharma jokingly mentioned the wand in his pants, but she clarified that she didn't like subpar wands. He suddenly remembered seeing a wand on the wall in his room but thought it was just a decoration. Ellen sighed and pulled out her own large wand, which made Pharma wonder about her background. Handing her wand to him, she instructed him to create basic water magic. Pharma felt lost and admitted he didn't remember how. Ellen took the wand back and demonstrated, easily creating a fountain with it. Impressed, Pharma watched closely. When she handed the wand back to him, he stepped up to the fountain and successfully conjured a massive fountain that surprised Ellen. She fell backward in shock, rushing over to check if he was okay. Ellen warned him that everyone has a limit on their magical energy, and she was worried he had exhausted himself. She quickly retrieved a smaller wand from her bag and urged him to hold it tightly. Pharma seemed skilled at handling wands, but when he used one to measure his mana, it unexpectedly broke. This shocked Ellen. She told him it had never happened before in their world. She pulled up his sleeve to reveal the glowing tattoo from the god of medicine, which amazed her. Pharma brushed it off, but Ellen warned him that this was a significant mark and told him never to use a mana-measuring wand in front of anyone, even his father. They decided to stop their lessons for the day. On their way back, they sat on a bench, and while they were playing around, Pharma discovered he could see medical issues in others. When he focused on Ellen, he noticed her finger looked blue. She admitted it was hurt from earlier. This revelation startled her, as it was a sign of the power given by the god of medicine. She panicked and ran away into the bushes, scared he might harm her. The next day, Pharma's father called him to say that Elin had a high fever and could no longer tutor him, which seemed strange. He gave Pharma some medicines and a note to deliver to her along with his regards. When Pharma arrived at Ellen's mansion, he waited in her room, recalling how frightened she had been the day before. Suddenly, the main door swung open and a terrified Ellen appeared, clad in full armor. She begged him not to kill her. Pharma tried to calm her down, assuring her he didn't even have his wand, which made her a little less anxious. When she removed her face mask, she asked why he was there. He explained that his father sent him with medicine. She cautiously stepped inside, but was still worried Pharma might have poisoned it. He reassured her, promising he wouldn't harm her, and handed her some medicine he had created using his scientific knowledge. Ellen looked concerned, but accepted the medicine, and Pharma insisted he still wanted her to be his tutor. She said he didn't need to learn since he was the reincarnation of the god of medicine, but he insisted he wanted her guidance. She bowed, agreeing to teach him if that was what the god wished. Pharma admitted he knew nothing about magic in this world and asked for her help since the library only had medicinal books. Ellen agreed to teach him. Before she left, he handed her some beautiful flowers, joking that he would take them back if she didn't agree to tutor him. The next day, Ellen approached him again, still in armor but looking more relaxed. She thanked him for the medicine, mentioning it worked faster than anything her father had given her. She had decided to tutor him and explained they would train on an abandoned island where they wouldn't hurt anyone if something went wrong. They spent the day practicing spells and mixing elements, and Ellen was impressed with how quickly he learned. After their training, Pharma sat on the staircase, observing his servants while taking notes. Using his magical eye ability, he noted all their ailments and what his powers could do. He discovered that Lot had dry skin on her hands, so he returned to his room and created medicine for her using his modern medical knowledge. When he gave the medicine to Lot, she was thrilled and asked if she could share it with the other servants and her mother. Pharma assured her he had made enough for everyone. He accompanied her as she distributed the medicine, and the servants were delighted. Lot explained that no noble had ever given them medicine before, as there was a significant divide between nobles and commoners. This saddened Pharma, and he vowed to make medicine accessible to everyone. The next morning, Pharma's father called him to the dining area, where his parents looked worried. They explained that his sister, Bland, had chicken pox, and that no one could go into her room for 3 weeks, except for a few servants. This reminded Pharma of when he had chicken pox 4 years ago. Understanding the situation, he returned to his room and contemplated the chemical composition of the medicine he would need to make. Although he was unsure if he could create such complex medicine, he kept trying. After many attempts, he finally succeeded. Sneaking into his sister's room, he was amazed at how quickly she recovered. The next day, Pharma visited his sister's room, where their father was inspecting her, and seemed pleased with her swift recovery. Later that evening, Pharma worked on building a simple microscope when his father called him in. He mentioned that he had been summoned to the royal capital and appeared quite anxious, coughing as he tried to conceal his discomfort. Pharma suspected his dad might have lung issues, but hoped he could manage it with his medicinal knowledge. His father explained that the royal summons came directly from the queen, and he couldn't reveal the details yet. However, he wanted Pharma to accompany him as an assistant to learn how to handle noble matters. They took a carriage to the royal capital, which bustled with activity. Upon arriving at the palace, they were greeted by a long-haired man who led them to a large chamber filled with worried faces. Pharma's father inquired about the queen's condition, but the man with the ponytail replied grimly, saying her situation was beyond medicine. They approached the queen's bedside and bowed respectfully. The queen looked weak, as if she were nearing death. Pharma's father checked her pulse and asked Pharma to fetch his bag. After taking a blood sample and conducting some magical tests, they moved to the window to examine the queen's horoscope, hoping to determine her fate. As they studied the stars, they shook their heads, realizing that the signs indicated the queen would not survive the night. Pharma's father turned back to her and began preparing a strong medicine from his bag. Pharma realized he was attempting to ease the queen's passing, giving her a moment of happiness before her death. The queen directly asked if she would live, and his father replied that the medicine would likely help her feel better in her last moments. He then helped the queen take a hit from an ancient device meant to administer the medicine. While Pharma turned away, he overheard the court discussing the queen's impending death, realizing they were preparing for a ritual of euthanasia. This made him feel terrible, and he thought he should do something to help. Using his special ability, he focused on the queen's condition and discovered that the main issue was in her lungs, possibly cancer or tuberculosis. After careful analysis of her symptoms, he narrowed it down to a form of AIDS, a disease that was incurable in this era, but with his knowledge from the future, he believed he could create a cure. Suddenly, the door burst open and a small child ran in, crying and pleading with the queen not to leave him. The queen's expression filled with sorrow, and at that moment, Pharma decided he could not let her die. He stepped forward, bowing before her, and asked for permission to try his new medicine on her. The court gasped at his boldness, and his father scolded him, warning him not to speak foolishly. However, the queen intervened, stating she would allow Pharma to try since he was the only one not trying to drug her. Grateful, Pharma rushed out of the chamber, locking himself in a room and using ice magic to jam the door shut. He began to unpack his supplies, but his father pounded on the door, demanding he open it immediately. Pharma focused intently, trying to envision the complex compound he needed for the medicine. Just as he began to draw out the chemical structure, his father broke through the door using magic. His father scolded him for his foolishness, insisting the disease was incurable and that he would only create more pain for the queen. Pharma argued that the illness was treatable and that his father was stuck in old beliefs, similar to superstitions. As Pharma started sympathizing the medicine, his father, offended by his dismissal of astrology, launched an ice blast at him. Quickly, Pharma turned to block the attack with a magical barrier, shocking his father. He then erected a giant ice wall, leaving his father in disbelief. No one could use magic without a wand or incantation, and his father demanded to know who he really was. Pharma struggled to explain his newfound abilities, but his father discovered a diary filled with healing texts and confronted him about it. Pharma explained that while in a coma, he had experienced a dream that gave him knowledge about medicine and even the Kama Sutra. His father asked if Pharma had received a revelation from the god of medicine, but Pharma honestly replied that he had no idea. His father, realizing the implications of such a revelation, put his wand back in its sheath. Pharma showed respect and effortlessly evaporated the entire ice wall he had created, once again shocking his father. He had thought Pharma's element was only water. Pharma resumed synthesizing the medicine, and once it was complete, he returned to the court wearing a face mask. Approaching the queen, he informed her that he had developed a treatment for her ailment, which he identified as AIDS, caused by her risky lifestyle. He explained that the treatment would require her to take the medicine daily for at least 6 months. Before giving her the medicine, he used a high-powered microscope to show her the bacteria present in her blood, explaining the concepts of bacteria and pathogens in detail. To reassure her, he drank from one of the goblets, demonstrating that he had no intention of poisoning her. The queen, convinced, took a sip from the other goblet. The nobles gathered around, intrigued by the microscope and marveling at the microscopic details they could see, asking him what kind of magic it was. Later, he returned to his mansion and jokingly offered his father a bottle of alcohol and some recreational substances, suggesting he enjoy some fun with the Kama Sutra. 3 months had passed since the queen's house call, and both Pharma and his father had developed a routine of comparing notes each morning about their experiences and exploring new ideas. Pharma's father was amazed at his son's knowledge of various positions, which he considered a divine blessing. His father mentioned that he had been approached by representatives from a medical college, eager to learn the secrets behind Pharma's medicines. Pharma immediately refused, insisting that only Xu could create the blue meth. His father assured him he had told the medical college that they could never replicate the drugs. He wanted to monopolize the market and be the sole producer. Pharma clarified that his true intention was to release the drug's recipe to the public, allowing any pharmacy to produce the AIDS cure. However, he was using his special abilities to create the medicine, which his father took seriously. He warned Pharma that he was now under scrutiny from various factions, including those in the pharmaceutical industry and those resentful of the Queen. His father suspected that someone had intentionally facilitated the outbreak of AIDS in the royal palace, implying that the Queen had been unfaithful. Pharma responded that AIDS didn't show immediate symptoms, and whoever transmitted it likely didn't realize they were infected. His father was taken aback by this knowledge and wondered if the god had imparted this information to him. Pharma simply replied that he had learned it from the Kama Sutra and through practice. With a cheeky grin, he said he was off to see the Queen and would return later. At the palace, while waiting outside the Queen's chambers, he was approached by a young attendant who inquired if there was anything Pharma wanted from the Queen. Confused, Pharma thought for a moment and admitted that if he were to receive a reward, he would just want to open a pharmacy and sell as much medicine as possible. Upon entering the Queen's room for a checkup, he noted any new symptoms and adjusted her dosage. He assured her that her recovery was progressing well, and in a few months she should be fully healthy. The Queen laughed, saying she couldn't wait to be intimate again. Pharma quickly reminded her that she needed to abstain for a few months to ensure her full recovery. Surprised by this, the Queen promised to control herself. She expressed that since being diagnosed with AIDS, her social status had declined significantly, and people no longer respected her. Pharma bluntly remarked that this was the consequence of her lifestyle choices, but added that her son would always meet her and respect her. He pointed out that many admirers would continue to adore her, which seemed to please the attention-seeking Queen. Satisfied, she dismissed Pharma, eager to enjoy some solitude. The next day, both Pharma and his father were summoned to the royal court. They arrived dressed elegantly, entering a hall filled with a large crowd of nobles, all eyes on the Queen sitting regally on her throne. The Queen summoned Pharma's father to the front and thanked him for his support during her time of distress. She then called Pharma from the crowd, catching him off guard. As he walked up timidly, she placed her staff on his shoulders, praising him for his exceptional service in saving her life. To his surprise, she presented him with a badge, officially making him the royal pharmacist, just like his father. Furthermore, she granted him permission to open a pharmacy anywhere in the royal city, a gesture that delighted him. The next day, a group of workers arrived at his home, introducing themselves as the royal carpenters, builders, and masons assigned by the Queen to ensure the pharmacy was constructed quickly and beautifully. Pharma explained that he hadn't finalized details regarding the location and design of the pharmacy, needing more time to decide. However, the workers insisted they could not return to the palace without starting the project, as the Queen would have their heads on spikes if they did. Just then, Ellen entered the room, her presence commanding attention. She informed Pharma that his father had ordered her to assist in creating the pharmacy. Pharma expressed his desire to explore other options for inspiration, but the workers insisted that the Queen would ensure their families never saw the light of day again if they didn't comply. After pondering for a moment, Pharma grabbed a pencil and paper and began to sketch a detailed layout for his dream pharmacy. Time passed and construction was progressing well. The contractor then asked if Pharma had decided on a name for his pharmacy. After thinking it over, he finally settled on Parallel World Pharmacy. Concerned that the name might be too flashy, he asked Ellen for her opinion. She reassured him that as the son of a noble aristocrat opening a medical shop, the news would undoubtedly attract attention, whether he liked it or not. Before they could continue their discussion, a hefty man approached them. Looking skeptical, he claimed he had heard rumors about the pharmacy and wanted to meet the owner. Pharma cheekily responded that he owned his mother every night before admitting that he was, in fact, the owner. The man introduced himself as being from a medicinal guild and questioned whether Pharma planned to sell lollipops for kids or hard candies since he looked too young for anything else. Pharma retorted that the man's mother enjoyed his lollipops a lot, claiming she was his only customer. He clarified that he intended to sell actual pharmaceutical drugs. When he inquired whether he needed to register with the guild to operate his shop, the man explained that the guild didn't accept registrations from nobles, but suggested that if Pharma begged, he might let him join. Pharma firmly rejected the offer, asserting that he could run a better operation on his own, selling superior medicine at lower prices. This infuriated the man, who claimed it was impossible. Ellen stepped in, warning him to back off before she lost her temper and turned him into a pot roast. Terrified, the man quickly fled the scene. Pharma then entered his shop to conduct a final inspection of the tools and mentioned to Ellen that they would need someone to handle the accounts and manage the finances. Lot chimed in, offering her services since she could read, write, and enjoyed math. Pharma, however, dismissed her suggestion, showing his misogynistic tendencies, and declared he would make her his errand girl, assuming that as a woman she couldn't manage finances. Lot eagerly accepted the role, and Pharma turned to Ellen again, emphasizing the need to find someone reliable for the accounts. That evening, he returned to his mansion to find the servants, his sister, and Lot in the hallway, fall in tears. Confused, he asked what was wrong. Cedric, the family accountant, stepped forward, thanking Pharma for his generosity over the years and explaining that he was retiring to live a peaceful life on a farm, which had caused the emotional scene. Pharma asked Cedric if he would still want to work if he had better knees. Cedric eagerly replied that he loved managing accounts. This prompted Pharma to rush to his father's chambers, seeking permission to hire Cedric as his pharmacy's accountant. His father revealed that he had dismissed Cedric so Pharma could employ him and instructed a servant to bring in a large chest. When the chest was opened, Pharma was stunned to find it filled with gold coins. His father advised him to use the money wisely and to ensure his pharmacy flourished. "It shouldn't be too hard for you," he added. It has been a month since the pharmacy opened, but surprisingly, Pharma has seen very few customers. Business has been slow, and he's starting to lose confidence in himself. Ellen reassures him that this is to be expected. Commoners usually stick to pharmacists and medics of their own kind and tend to seek out those they've been visiting for years. Nobles and aristocrats typically prefer house calls for their medical needs. Pharma sighs in frustration, wondering why people won't even try his pharmacy once. Just then, Lot enters the room with a stack of papers. She excitedly shares that she conducted a survey around town to gather commoners' opinions about the new pharmacy. She starts listing the issues they raised. 1. Imperial seal. The seal on the door indicates the pharmacy is answerable only to the queen, which is usually reserved for high-ranking nobles. 2. Intimidating guards. The scary-looking guards stationed outside are meant to protect the store, but they frighten off commoners with their chilly demeanor. What do these people want? Friendly Teletubbies? People feel unsure about what to wear in such an upscale establishment, which is a bit middle class, to say the least. 4. Etiquette concerns. There's fear of using the wrong etiquette in front of a noble. 5. Assumptions about prices. Many believe the medicine must be expensive, even though it's actually cheaper than competitors. 6. Distrust in a young owner. Finally, many are hesitant to trust a pharmacy run by a child, which is a fair concern. After discussing these issues, they are finally rewarded with a customer. An old sailor enters asking for pills to reduce nausea. After taking the pills and a sip of water, he promises to return. Pharma, eager to help, offers him vitamin C pills, explaining that sailors are prone to certain ailments. The old man hesitates and declines, claiming someone is waiting outside for him. Curious, Pharma follows him and overhears him speaking in hushed tones to 2 suited men. Before he can investigate further, he's intercepted by his parents, who are wearing masks that he recognizes from certain websites. He leads them into the shop, jokingly telling them to keep their fetishes in the bedroom. His dad tells him to be quiet and asks for a tour of the pharmacy. Pharma shows them around, starting with the main floor where he sells medicine, then to a patient rest area that includes isolation cells for those in need of mental health care. He also shows them the bathroom and kitchen before leading them to his personal lab, where he develops new methods for creating crack. Once the tour concludes, they sit down on the couch, and Pharma explains that customer traffic has been low. His mother suggests he create skincare cosmetics to sell to nobles and aristocrats, which would boost his popularity. Pharma thanks her for the great idea, but his father dampens the mood, warning against producing the white powder. Confused, Pharma asks what he means, and his father explains that he's noticed women who use such powders for fairer skin tend to contract more diseases and have a lower life expectancy. Pharma realizes his father is referring to the heavy metals previously found in beauty products, which are now banned. He promises to create better products. Just then, a young man bursts into the room, looking terrified. He asks Pharma if he is the pharmacist, explaining that his mistress has collapsed in the carriage. Pharma rushes after him to find a young noblewoman looking pale and weak. Using his knowledge, he examines her and discovers that she has been following a dangerous practice of bloodletting to achieve a paler appearance. Recognizing the risks involved, he takes her back to the pharmacy and gives her medicine for anemia. As she regains strength, she reveals that she started this dangerous practice after her crush rejected her for a fairer girl. Pharma advises her against such harmful actions and encourages her to come back next week for some new cosmetic products he plans to develop. A week later, she returns, and he presents her with a heavy metal-free powder and foundation that she immediately loves. With Lot's advertising efforts, the new products attract many customers, leading to an uptick in traffic to the pharmacy. After a while, the young noblewoman returns to the pharmacy, this time accompanied by a group of her friends. Unfortunately, all the cosmetics have already sold out, which disappoints them. They sit in her room, and she proposes an exciting idea: investing in Pharma's venture to open a subsidiary dedicated solely to cosmetics. Pharma eagerly agrees, especially when his accountant gives him the green light. Before long, a new shop opens alongside a lab for testing and creating cosmetics. The noblewoman recruits a team of trustworthy female pharmacists who specialize in cosmetics to work under Pharma, increasing the supply of products. The news of the new fairness powder even reaches the queen, who calls Pharma to inquire about his business. During their meeting, Pharma presents her with a new lip gloss, a product she immediately adores for how it enhances her lips. However, he cautions her to be careful not to overdo it and risk health issues again. Impressed, the queen insists on being the first to receive these cosmetics and advises Pharma to raise his prices, warning him that local businesses will suffer otherwise. Pharma agrees to her request. Time passes, and Pharma's father embarks on a voyage across the sea to meet Lord Adam, a wealthy noble known for his extensive port and medicinal production. During their conversation, Adam mentions that they're struggling with a company trying to evade taxes. Pharma's father calmly suggests that they should try to resolve the issue through dialogue and sets up a meeting to address the matter early on.
Suddenly, he turns to Pharma and tells him to go out and play instead of listening to adult conversations. Realizing he needs to act more like a child, Pharma starts acting silly, proclaiming he will swim in the sea before running away. He heads to the beach, where he spots Lot and his younger sister, Bland, building sandcastles. Both girls greet him, and Bland begs to play in the water. Pharma hesitates, reminding them that neither of them knows how to swim. However, both girls insist, promising to stay at the water's edge. Finally, he agrees to let them dip their toes, cautioning them not to get too wet. Just then, Ellen appears out of nowhere, sipping wine. She playfully invites Pharma to join her in the water, but he politely declines, which prompts her to head into the ocean on her own. Sitting on the beach, Pharma recalls that he used to be a great swimmer in his past life. Memories flood back of his sister begging to join him in the water, and he remembers promising her they would play together when she turned 5, a promise that was never fulfilled due to tragedy. Lost in thought, he wipes away his tears but remains brooding. Suddenly, he hears a loud splash and sees Bland struggling in the water while Lot screams for help. Bland, unable to swim, is getting pulled away from the shore. Pharma jumps into action, running into the ocean despite Ellen's warnings that he might get hurt too. He swims toward Bland, but soon realizes that a powerful wave is dragging him down as well. In a moment of desperation, as he tries to reach Bland, Tattoo activate. A brilliant light radiates from it, and to his astonishment, the water in the area begins to evaporate, leaving Bland on the seafloor. Fish swim frantically around them as the water vanishes completely. Ellen stands up, confused, and watches Pharma holding back a column of water like Moses while cradling Bland in one arm. He manages to get them both back to the beach. Bland, trembling in fear, cries in Pharma's arms, while Ellen sits in shock, trying to comprehend the miraculous event. Pharma comforts Bland, relieved to find her unhurt. Ellen, still bewildered, asks Pharma what just happened. He honestly replies that he has no idea, speculating that it might have been one of his water magic abilities, though he had previously thought such magic didn't exist. Pharma is taken aback by the events that unfolded, noticing that even Lot appears frightened of him now. Despite that, he feels relief for having saved his sister from imminent danger and hugs her tightly. Later that night, he broods on his bed, reflecting on how he had removed all the water from the surrounding area without considering the risks. A small mistake could have cost them their lives. Lot enters to put him to bed and starts to leave, but Pharma calls her back, apologizing and assuring her that he won't use that magic again. Confused, Lot responds that she wasn't scared of him at all. Rather, she was in awe of his magical abilities and impressed by his quick thinking that saved Bland's life. She expresses her guilt about being frozen in fear while Bland was drowning. Pharma reassures her that she made the right choice by not jumping in since she can't swim either, emphasizing that she is just as important to him as his sister. Overjoyed, Lot thanks him from the bottom of her heart before heading to her room for the night. The next morning, they open the pharmacy to find a massive crowd gathered outside. Pharma is stunned by the turnout, as they usually don't have this many customers. He wonders if it's because they were closed for the weekend due to their beach trip. Ellen, however, claims it's because Pharma's medicine is simply excellent. As Pharma looks around, he notices a pair of men in white robes watching him intently. He approaches them to offer assistance, but they ignore him and walk away. Later, while enjoying tea with Ellen and Lot, he brings up the robed men. Ellen mentions that she tried to help them too, but they only seemed interested in Pharma. Lot adds that she asked if she could assist them, but they didn't respond. Ellen points out that their robes don't match those typically worn in the region, which raises suspicion about their intentions. Lot, feeling uneasy, suggests they contact the guards, and Pharma agrees. The following morning, as the guards unlock the pharmacy doors, they are nearly run over by a horse-drawn carriage that crashes through the gate, destroying everything in its path. The guard rushes to Pharma's mansion to report the incident, only to face Pharma's outraged father, who demands to know what happened. The guard apologizes, explaining he didn't have time to react. Pharma realizes this is a bold attack from their enemies.
His father suspects the pharmacy guild and the robed men are behind it, aiming to shut down Pharma's shop because of his affordable, high-quality medicine. He instructs the guard to prepare for more trouble and decides to write to the queen about the situation. Pharma insists on checking on the pharmacy, but his father warns him that he needs to gather more information first. Running to the pharmacy, Pharma finds it in ruins, with workers clearing away rubble. One employee explains that the shop is devastated, but they used purification magic to eliminate any lingering odors. Pharma checks the medicine room and finds it untouched, relieved that he can still create more medicine. The employee informs him that Ellen and Lot took as much medicine as they could to the mansion to help those in urgent need. As Pharma exits, he encounters Gene, the old man he once helped, accompanied by a group of strong young men. Gene expresses his support and the local community's sympathy, offering their help to rebuild the shop. Inspired by their kindness, Pharma watches as they begin to clean up the place. Suddenly, a woman rushes in, pleading for a doctor. Pharma approaches her, and she breaks down in tears, explaining that her father has collapsed from heat and isn't waking up. Without hesitation, Pharma mounts a horse with the girl, following her directions to her father's location. As they ride, he worries about what could have caused her father's condition and whether he has enough medicine. When the girl instructs him to ride past a hill, he feels uneasy about why her father would be in such a secluded area. As they traverse the grasslands, Pharma turns to ask her a question, only to find that she has vanished. Instead, he is surrounded by the men in white hoods on horseback. One of them raises a wand and demands to know if Pharma was the one responsible for the sudden disappearance of part of the ocean near the beach. Pharma stands frozen in shock as the man, claiming to be an investigator from the royal kingdom, awaits his answer. Suddenly, Pharma has a flashback of Ellen teaching him about the temple, the holy organization that holds immense power in this world. According to her, the temple grants nobility status based on an assessment of magical strength. She explains that the temple's influence is nearly equal to that of the queen, viewing archdukes and other nobles as insignificant in comparison. Ellen warns him about the temple's investigators, who are known for their ruthlessness. They are said to erase anyone who questions their beliefs, using their extraordinary magical abilities. Snapping back to the present, Pharma finds himself facing the leader of the robed group, who introduces himself as Saul. Saul bluntly asks Pharma why he doesn't have a shadow, accusing him of being an evil spirit rather than a human. Pharma protests, insisting he is not a ghost. One of Saul's companions interrupts, demanding to know what Pharma truly is. Pharma replies honestly that, as far as he knows, he is a human being, but Saul isn't interested in explanations. He orders Pharma to keep his hands up and take 10 steps back. Wanting to de-escalate the situation, Pharma complies. Suddenly, Saul uses magic to trap Pharma in a dome, but to their astonishment, the dome shatters completely. Panic ensues among the investigators as one of them unleashes fire magic at Pharma. In response, Pharma conjures a fire shield around himself, and then removes the oxygen from the area, extinguishing the flames. The investigators mistakenly believe Pharma has fire magic, prompting another to use ice magic against him. Pharma counters again with a shield, effortlessly nullifying the attack. Their disbelief grows as they witness someone with multiple attributes wielding wandless magic. Frustrated, Saul decides they should abandon their attempt to capture Pharma alive and instead go for the kill. This revelation sends a chill down Pharma's spine. The men simultaneously unleash a barrage of earth, wind, water, and fire magic at him. The combined assault blasts Pharma, and as the dust settles, they expect to see him defeated. Instead, he emerges encased in an ice cage, his resolve hardening. Realizing it's time to fight back, he casts a massive flashbang, disrupting Saul's momentum. As the cronies rush to assist Saul, they watch in awe as Pharma levitates the ice block that had trapped him. He informs them that he could easily eliminate them with a single attack, but he was born in this world to heal, not to harm. Saul is struck with fear, finally noticing the gang sign tattoo on Pharma's arm. He suddenly proclaims that Pharma is not a mere human, but the god of medicine himself. This declaration stuns Pharma, who attempts to deny such a title, but the investigators bow down before him, realizing their grave mistake. Saul, now melodramatic, claims he will die from his wounds and begs for forgiveness, dramatically drawing a small dagger from his waist and pressing it to his throat. Pharma reacts instinctively, stopping the blade just before it can pierce Saul's skin, using his magic to make it vanish. Confused, Saul and his companions watch as Pharma states firmly that he doesn't want anyone to die. He only wishes to run his pharmacy in peace. Pharma backs off, using his keen observation to spot the open fracture in Saul's leg. He quickly assesses the situation, realizing that amputation could lead to death and he must perform surgery to save Saul's life. However, they are far from town, and time is running out. Although he is primarily a pharmacist, he understands that without immediate attention, Saul won't survive. Determined, Pharma uses his earth magic to craft a makeshift table and instructs Saul's cronies to lay him down. He tells them to fetch a carriage. Saul is astonished to see the god of medicine willing to treat him, and Pharma reassures him not to worry. By evening, they set up a tent, and Pharma enters to explain the procedure. He tells Saul he will administer antibiotics first, then anesthesia for pain relief, followed by cleaning the wound, removing damaged tissue, and stitching him back up. After preparing his surgical equipment, Pharma administers anesthesia to Saul's spine. Once he creates a block of ice to numb the area, he checks with Saul, who confirms he feels nothing, relieving Pharma as he begins the surgery with a scalpel. Hours later, Pharma emerges from the tent, where Saul's cronies eagerly await news. He delivers the good news that the surgery was successful, and their commander will live to see another day. In disbelief, they bow in awe, unable to comprehend that Pharma not only spared their lives, but chose to help them instead. Pharma urges them to remain calm and orders them to keep this incident a secret, as he does not want his powers revealed to the general public. Several months later, Saul, the chief bishop and investigator of the temple, unexpectedly visits Pharma's pharmacy. Ellen and Lot are shocked to see him, but Saul assures them that he owes his life to Pharma. He presents them with a box of chocolates as a token of gratitude, expressing that he can walk again because of Pharma's help. Saul promises to always be a loyal servant and informs Pharma that he has erased all files regarding the mysterious boy with no shadow, ensuring Pharma won't face further issues on that front. Pharma thanks Saul for his assistance and glances outside, where he notices Saul's entourage carrying a large assortment of gifts. He finds it a bit excessive, but is touched by the gesture. Saul requests a private conversation and reveals a box containing a special wand, said to be the original wand of the god of medicine, which has been kept in the temple's treasury alongside the statue of the god. Saul believes this wand rightfully belongs to Pharma, claiming it can utilize all attributes and is capable of both combat and healing. Pharma is taken aback by the revelation, while Ellen visibly salivates at the sight of such a magnificent wand. However, he hesitates to handle such a national treasure, fearing it might break or be stolen. Saul encourages him to pick it up, and when Pharma does, the wand begins to glow brilliantly. Both Saul and Ellen exclaim that the wand recognizes Pharma as its true owner. Ellen eagerly asks if she can hold the wand as well, but when she does, it slips from her fingers and falls to the floor. Turning to Saul, he explains that the wand belongs to a god, and thus only its rightful owner can wield it. Pharma picks it up again, and following Saul's instruction, tries to sit on it. To his surprise, the wand starts to float in the air alongside him. Saul eventually departs with his men, assuring Pharma that the temple will not pose any more threats. However, he warns Pharma to remain cautious, as the last attack on his pharmacy wasn't orchestrated by the temple, indicating someone else might be targeting him. Pharma admits he has no idea who could be behind it, but is eager to find out. Before leaving, Saul gifts him a locket, which will suppress his godly powers. To Pharma's delight, he looks down and sees his own shadow on the floor, making him feel more human than ever. Later that day, Pharma spends time with his sister and Lot, taking them to the market to buy some fruit. He feels exhausted as the customer base has exploded, and he realizes he needs to hire more employees. While browsing, he notices a young woman desperately searching for a particular medicine in a neighboring pharmacy, only to be told by the owner that even though Pharma's medicines are effective, they lack the guild's approval, preventing them from carrying his products. That evening, Pharma returns to the shop and shares his plan with Ellen about establishing a new guild. She checks the minimum requirements and informs him that they can legally start the guild if they choose to. Ellen believes that once the guild is established, new shops will join to capitalize on the new medicines, effectively reducing their workload. They quickly decide to move forward with the guild, and Pharma asks Cedric to prepare the necessary paperwork. The next morning, while walking to his pharmacy, Pharma encounters a ragged man holding his daughter on his back, banging on the doors of a local doctor's office. Pharma informs him that the doctor is out of town for a few days, but offers to examine the girl himself. The man looks at Pharma skeptically, worried about the cost, but Pharma reassures him that he will cover everything. He sends Lot ahead to prepare for the examination and tells the man to follow him. As they pass through the front gate of Pharma's pharmacy, they are greeted by a crowd of people waiting for assistance. They enter a clean room where Pharma instructs the man to lay his daughter down on a stretcher. He hands a mask to the man, explaining that it prevents the spread of infection. The man realizes they entered through the back to avoid spreading his daughter's illness. Sitting down, Pharma begins asking questions about the girl. The man introduces her as Marie and explains that she is 7 years old. Pharma inquires when she last ate, and the man replies that she hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon and has been sick since then. Pharma assesses that Marie appears dehydrated and barely conscious, indicating a high fever. He asks the man if he knows her weight, but he does not. Pharma instructs him to stand on a scale while holding Marie, noting the combined weight before weighing the man alone. This will allow Pharma to determine Marie's weight accurately for proper dosage. He examines her for any physical signs of illness before using his special magic eye to look for underlying issues. The man notices this and asks if Pharma is using divine magic arts, to which Pharma confirms. After conducting a thorough checkup, Pharma turns to the father, Pierre, and informs him that Marie has a severe case of influenza. This surprises Pierre, as he expected a more dire diagnosis. He asks Pharma if he is certain it isn't a case of possession by spirits, to which Pharma shakes his head. Pierre expresses his confusion, stating he knows of no cold that could cause such a high fever and convulsions. Pharma reassures him that the fever is a sign of Marie's white blood cells fighting the virus, which is actually a good thing because the virus thrives in cooler temperatures. Pharma hands Pierre a pouch and instructs him to have Marie snort the powder twice a day. Pierre looks scared and asks what the powder is for, but Pharma simply tells him not to worry. He explains that he will teach Pierre how to administer it properly. Pharma gently lays Marie back on the bed and reassures Pierre that she will heal quickly. Later that night, Pharma checks on Marie and releases her, declaring she is strong enough to return home. He gives Pierre some medicine and tells him not to hesitate to approach the guards if he encounters any issues, even though the shop is closed. Pierre is surprised and asks if Pharma is willing to see Marie at night if anything happens. Pharma affirms that he is, as it allows him to help more people. Then, Pierre asks about payment, promising to pay Pharma back slowly, even with interest, since he doesn't have enough money immediately. Pharma, however, tells him not to worry about it. The fee is equivalent to just a piece of bread. This shocks Pierre, but Pharma explains that this way, poorer families won't hesitate to seek help for even minor problems. Pierre reveals that he is also a pharmacist, but lacks the knowledge and the necessary medicine to treat Marie's illness. He sits down, determined to learn as much as he can, while his wife urges him to not worry about it, claiming he has already helped enough people. With tears in his eyes, Pierre expresses his fear that he wouldn't be able to save them if they fell ill, as he feels he lacks the deep knowledge and magical abilities that Pharma possesses. His wife warns him never to speak about their daughter's treatment to anyone, as it could result in his expulsion from the medical guild and the closure of his shop. Nevertheless, Pierre insists he will make the necessary choice. The next day, during a guild meeting, the overweight guild leader complains about their losses due to Pharma's parallel pharmacy. He shares an incident where his wife unknowingly bought cosmetics from Pharma and smashed them out of frustration. Other guild members echo his sentiments, lamenting their declining sales. When it's finally Pierre's turn to speak, he stands up and candidly states that they cannot compete with Pharma. He excels in both knowledge and the genuine care he offers to everyone, regardless of social standing. Pierre recounts Marie's treatment, shocking the others and causing some to call him a traitor. The guild leader insists they must find a way to undermine Pharma's reputation, warning that if they don't, they will face shop closures. Pierre counters that they should learn from Pharma and adopt similar practices, rather than relying on ineffective herbs their ancestors used without understanding their efficacy. The other members, outraged by his remarks, expel him from the guild. By evening, Pierre returns to find his shop destroyed and his license revoked. Devastated, he sits on the steps, tears streaming down his face. Just then, Pharma happens to pass by and realizes Pierre is a pharmacist. Pierre shares his misfortunes with Pharma, expressing that he now has to move to a new country and start over. Pharma, seeing Pierre's despair, offers him a helping hand. He shares that he is starting his own guild and has just received permission from the Majesty, inviting Pierre to be his first member. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Pierre shakes Pharma's hand, tears of joy in his eyes, feeling forever indebted for the lifeline Pharma has offered him. As time passes, Pierre rebuilds his store and prepares for the grand reopening. Nervous but motivated by his daughter's encouragement, he opens the doors to find hundreds of eager customers waiting outside. Months later, while having breakfast, Pharma's father receives a letter from his older brother, Paul, who is supposed to return home for a vacation. However, he informs the family that Paul won't be returning for a while, due to some issues. After dismissing the others, Pharma's father pulls Pharma into his office and explains that a new disease has emerged near Paul's college, rapidly spreading and claiming a significant portion of the population. Pharma is taken aback by the staggering number of fatalities as his father explains the situation. He learns that researchers at Al's college attempted to isolate specimens from the disease, but tragically, 2 researchers succumbed to necrosis after coming into contact with it, indicating its high contagion level. Concerned, Pharma asks if they can obtain a specimen for analysis, but his father informs him that all remains of the infected have been incinerated with holy flames. Additionally, the island where the outbreak occurred has been quarantined and the laboratory is completely shut down. Pharma, now aware of the severity of necrosis, presses for more details. His father reveals that before incinerating everything, some students used Pharma's specially designed microscope to create sketches of the pathogen. Without hesitation, Pharma instructs his father to ask Paul for those sketches. The next day, Pharma rushes to his shop, anxiety weighing heavily on him. Ellen, noticing his distress, inquires if he's okay. He explains the dire situation regarding the spreading disease and mentions an upcoming large fair in the capital, where cargo from the infected area will be arriving. Just then, Lot arrives with a scroll claiming it's from Paul. Pharma opens it and realizes the disease is the plague, one of the most difficult illnesses to cure. Later that day, he meets with his father and confirms that the disease they are facing is known as the Black Death, or the bubonic plague. His father recalls that the last outbreak occurred 210 years ago in this world, causing a drastic population decline. Pharma remembers the Earth's outbreak in the 1500s, which claimed nearly half of the population due to its highly contagious nature, transmitted through fleas on rats. Recognizing the urgency, Pharma's father insists they must intercept the cargo. Pharma reveals that he has already initiated preparations for quarantine areas. He explains he has devised a way to create a medicine, but only he can do it using divine arts. His father suggests they involve the queen for additional support, and they head to the palace. After meeting with the queen and explaining the crisis, she quickly grasps the situation. She agrees to close the city gates, minimize trade, and grants Pharma permission to establish inspection stations for the incoming cargo. In the following days, the inspection stations are set up, and Pharma meets with Pierre, giving him a newly designed compound microscope, a significant upgrade from the previous model. He warns Pierre about the disease and supplies him with stocks of medicine before leaving. The next morning, Pharma and Ellen depart the city to assess the extent of the outbreak. Although Pharma is anxious about facing such a terrifying disease, Ellen reassures him that he will be fine. They travel to Atom City near the beach where Pharma had previously found the ocean, and meet with 2 underlings who had been sent ahead. They inform him that the city appears unaffected for now, with inspection stations set up to ensure no infected individuals slip through. Thanking them for their cooperation, Pharma boards a small rowboat to approach the fleet of ships carrying cargo from the quarantined island. The ships have been forbidden from docking for several days, causing frustration among the captains and crews. Pharma enters the first ship, where the captain impatiently asks how long they will be delayed. Pharma urges the captain to cooperate as he locates the ship's physician and requests the necessary documents and health certificates. After reviewing the documents, he descends below deck to inspect each crew member for signs of the plague, followed by a thorough check of the cargo. Satisfied that the ship is not contaminated, he gives it the green light to dock. After that, he boards his boat again, heading towards the next ship. However, a different captain begins throwing tomatoes at them, furious about the prolonged wait. Another captain chimes in, arguing about the urgency of his cargo spoiling. The argument escalates, leaving Pharma unsure of how to resolve the situation. Suddenly, the sound of cannon fire echoes across the water, causing panic among the captains. When Pharma turns around, he sees a fleet of royal ships approaching, led by Jean, an older man who often frequents his shop. Jean commands the other ships to maintain order or face dire consequences, instantly silencing them. Grateful for Jean's intervention, Pharma boards his ship and thanks him for his help. He instructs Jean to remain vigilant and ensure no new ships attempt to dock illegally. Returning to the inspection tents, Pharma talks with the other volunteers, who report that so far there have been 0 cases of infection, bringing a sense of hope amidst the crisis. Pharma's moment of relief is short-lived when Adam, the acting mayor, arrives at the camp wearing a hood. He reports that a nearby village has experienced several deaths, likely caused by sailors who illegally docked and tried to unload their goods the day before. A wave of fear washes over Pharma as he realizes this could be the plague. Adam explains that it began with a fever, and after the first death, the disease spread rapidly, claiming numerous lives. Determined to act, Pharma starts to leave, but Ellen urges him not to go alone. She points out that he is responsible for inspecting the other ships. Pharma insists that Ellen can handle that, explaining that he must prioritize the situation in the village. He hops on his magic wand, taking off into the air, but loses his balance and nearly crashes into a tree. Fortunately, his wand phases through it without harm. As Pharma descends near the village, he finds chaos. People are ready to flee, believing their home is possessed by spirits. He calls for them to return and stay, but the villagers, filled with distrust, arm themselves against him. To prove his intentions, he creates an igloo around the village and shows them his badge, claiming he can cure the disease if they cooperate. Seeing the royal pharmacist, the villagers begin to feel hopeful and start complying. Pharma establishes a temporary headquarters in an old house and gathers the village leaders to discuss his plan. He proposes to segregate the village into 3 zones, one for those heavily infected, another for those with mild symptoms, and a third for the uninfected. He reassures them that the most infected will receive priority treatment, which convinces them to cooperate. The following day, Pharma begins his work at one of the temporary hospitals. He checks the patients. Some are infected, some are dead, and others are just showing early signs. He instructs the volunteers to start administering the medicine he brought while he personally tends to the most severely infected, using his divine magic to enhance the effects of his medicine, resulting in rapid recoveries. Meanwhile, back in the royal capital, Pharma's father receives a letter detailing how to create a vaccine for the plague. He calls upon Professor Casper, a seasoned expert in vaccines who has not yet had the chance to prove herself. After showing her the letter from Pharma, she surprises him by stating that she already developed a similar vaccine 3 years ago. His father follows her to her lab, astonished to find vials of the vaccine ready for production. He immediately orders the team to ramp up vaccine production and halt any other research. After finishing his work in the village, Pharma emerges to meet with the village leaders, informing them that he managed to treat many of the infected and that most are on the path to recovery. However, he regrets that some lives were lost and stresses the importance of keeping everyone in the village for at least 2 weeks. He instructs them to kill any rodents or fleas immediately, despite the potential backlash from activists. As Pharma leaves on his wand, he feels exhausted but notices smoke rising from the forest's edge. He descends to find his volunteers surrounding a group of tied-up sailors, burning their cargo. The sailors, sick and frightened, explain that their captain abandoned them after they fell ill. Pharma promises them treatment if they provide information. They reveal they were carrying cargo that included white flying squirrels from an island, which was delivered by holy knights. Suddenly, Pharma connects the dots. This was a plot against the queen. The disease that had previously afflicted her was likely a deliberate attempt on her life. Now, the plan involved using the most deadly disease in existence to eliminate her and potentially all of her subjects. The next day, chaos erupts in the royal capital as armored knights breach the gates, creating a massive disturbance. In the midst of the chaos, one of the knights releases a swarm of squirrels into the city. News of the attack quickly reaches the queen, who is initially confused, thinking they are under siege from an enemy kingdom. However, a scout quickly informs her that it's just 5 knights causing the ruckus. Pharma's father realizes the gravity of the situation and shares his suspicions with the queen. He recalls a classmate named Cal, who was just as brilliant as him, but lacked moral principles. One night, he had stumbled upon Cal conducting inhumane experiments in the dungeon, leading him to report Cal to the authorities, which resulted in Cal's expulsion from the medical community. He warns the queen that Cal was researching a special type of poison, capable of spreading from person to person, effectively creating an epidemic without physical contact. Meanwhile, the battle rages on in the city as the knights continue to unleash squirrels while clashing with the royal forces, who are quickly overwhelmed. Just then, Saul and his gang arrive, halting the knights in their tracks. Pharma finally returns to the city and climbs the bell tower, where he sees the infection beginning to spread. He spots the flying squirrels moving through the streets and quickly descends to meet his father. Together, they head toward the main gate, where Saul is interrogating the injured knights. The knights reveal they were coerced into their actions by a madman who threatened their island's population. When Pharma's father asks if the madman is Cal, they confirm it, but before they can share more information, the knights succumb to the disease and die right in front of them. Pharma's father orders their bodies to be burned. Feeling a strange sensation, Pharma turns around and sees a shadowy figure perched atop a building. He tells his father he needs to return to the pharmacy, sensing something ominous. Meanwhile, Lot and Cedric enter the pharmacy to retrieve some supplies. Suddenly, Lot turns to see a hooded figure stabbing Cedric in the back. Pharma and his father arrive at the pharmacy just in time to find Lot and Cedric bleeding on the floor, with the dark figure looming over them. Pharma's father charges at Cal, but Cal easily blocks the attack, revealing his ghastly face. Pharma rushes to Cedric's side, realizing the stab wound is not ordinary. The blood has been poisoned. While his father battles Cal, Pharma focuses on identifying the poison. He discovers multiple toxins within Cedric and Lot's bodies, and gets to work curing them one by one. Meanwhile, Cal gains the upper hand against Pharma's father, sending him crashing to the ground. Cal attempts to create another deadly poison, but Pharma counters by dispelling it and punches Cal with reinforced magic. The two fall from the building, but Pharma manages to strike Cal with his wand, rendering him motionless. In a final act of desperation, Pharma stabs Cal in the chest, leading to his immediate death. With Cal defeated, the group rejoices, and they begin to control the spread of the Black Death. Slowly, normalcy returns to the city as the Queen declares the epidemic over. Pharma returns to his pharmacy, settling back into his routine and eagerly anticipating the new challenges that lie